Campaign 2012.
Washington Journal continues. Representative Bill Huizenga is Republican from Michigan. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Libby. Thanks.
We'll take your calls for this segment. Democrats, 202-737-0001. Republicans, 202-737-0002. Independent callers, 202-628-0205. We'll also be taking questions from students from the University of Southern Mississippi. That's through the C-SPAN Campaign 2012 bus visiting the school today. They'll get their questions to you as well. We'll also have callers. But to start out with, you serve on the Financial Services Committee.
Yes.
You are the highest-ranking freshman on that committee. Talk to us about what you're hoping to see come out of the so-called super committee, the deficit reduction panel. I mean, have you heard anything? Everyone's talking about how tight-lipped the committee members are being.
They are very tight-lipped, and coming from Michigan, my district actually touches both Dave Camp's and Fred Upton's districts. I serve on the Financial Services with Jeb Henserling. I've gotten to know them all well. And they're pretty tight-lipped, and that is not unusual, I think, for this kind of thing. I'm not saying it's necessarily the ideal, but not too terribly unexpected.
Representative Huizenga is a former realtor and small business owner. Does that give you any different perspective on the U.S. economy? As a realtor, did you get a sense early on at how the housing market was faring, at how people's pocketbooks were doing?
Yeah, very much so. And additionally, I own a sand and gravel company, which is connected to a ready-mix concrete company that my dad and my uncle started. My cousins now own that. We're very sensitive to what's happening in the housing industry. So having a background in real estate, having done housing development, and then, of course, still being tied in with construction, yeah, I've had a front row seat to what's been going on, especially in Michigan over the last decade.
Looking at the unemployment rate in Michigan, 11.1%. The total unemployed is 3.9 million, and there were 14,200 jobs lost from August to September.
Yeah, it's been a tough decade for Michigan. I served in the state house. I was elected in 2002, and Michigan has term limits, so I did 3 two-year terms. Was done in 2008, and that was, excuse me, that was probably some of the most volatile, depressing years that Michigan has seen since the Great Depression, and it cut across all areas. Fortunately for my home county, we're about 2% below, 3% below where that state average is. But I've got other counties in the district, second district, which runs about 250 miles along the lakeshore of Michigan. On the west side, where we've had nearly 20% unemployment in some of those counties. So it has been very difficult.
You mentioned the collegiality you have with members of the Deficit Reduction Committee. They represent areas right around you, and you mentioned, of course, that they're still tight-lipped despite how close you might be geographically. But you've been one of the freshman House Republicans who've been critical of the secrecy surrounding the super committee. How are you weighing in on this, and how do you feel like your viewpoints are getting heard?
Yeah, well, that was a Washington Post article, I believe, yesterday that sort of outlined some of that, and I made no secret right at the very beginning. I was one of those freshmen that signed a letter asking for open hearings, open meetings, just like what we would do with any other committee. And you know, I understand that there are times where you may have to go into some sort of closed executive type hearing into it. But I think overall and ultimately, sunshine and transparency would bring a better product. My understanding is that what's happening internally is not much more different than what we're seeing externally with the discussions that are going on. We have a philosophical difference about the size, scope, and role of government, and that's really what's driving the debate.
Some of the comments our guest made in this Washington Post article. I don't think anyone would view this as a completely transparent process. And then towards the end of the piece, you say, I've told our members I love you guys and I've got great confidence in you, but I've got little confidence in the ability of this structure to work.
Yeah, I really do. And I know, obviously, the House members the best. I've met a couple of the Senate members. And I believe that they are going in with good intentions, that they want to solve this. What I'm afraid of, Libby, is that the deck is stacked against them. The system is stacked against them to ultimately reach the goal of what they're trying to do. Can they get there? Possibly. I think they possibly can. But as I said, I guess, I've told them all, I love you, but I'm not sure that the way that it's structured, it's going to be able to be successful the way that it was intended to be. And you have to remember, this was a Senate initiative, not something that the House necessarily thought of or thought was a great idea. The Senate had insisted this as part of that Budget Reduction Act.
Let's get right to the phones. Ed, Democratic caller in Santa Fe, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Ed.
Good morning to all of you. Congressman, I'm not real sure what you would think about it, but I know that if somebody causes, through their actions and through their leadership, a company to end up losing a whole bunch of money from beginning with a surplus and ending up with a huge deficit, that company would go under, and that owner of that company shouldn't get paid for failure. Well, I believe that in the last 10 years, this country was led to the woes that we are in right now, and yet during the whole of the 88 years of the Bush administration, for 7 out of those 8 years, Congress granted itself a raise. I believe that Congress should take that raise and reverse their salaries and that of all of federal government. I'm not talking about getting rid of jobs. I am simply talking about reducing the salaries of all federal employees back to the year 2000, because I, sir, do not believe in rewarding failure.
I appreciate that, caller, and it's something that when I was in the state legislature in Michigan, I actually advocated for. My understanding, and being 10 months into this, my understanding is that constitutionally there is some protections in there for the members. I'm not sure that should necessarily be there. Frankly, I agree. As a business owner, I've had to make those tough decisions and have had to look at employees and say, sorry, we're not going to be able to do a raise this year. Partially because, guess what? I'm losing money, or my income is going to be coming down from what we've been doing in the company. And I don't think that should apply any differently with government, whether it's local, state, or federal level.
This morning, C-SPAN's Campaign 2012 bus is visiting the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and we'll hear this morning from some political science and journalism students who have questions for our guest, Congressman Huizenga. First up is Catherine Wilson, student at the University of Southern Mississippi. Hi there, joining us by Skype.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, kudos to you. I'm not sure I'd be up at 8:30 when I was in college to go ask a politician questions, so I'm glad you're with us.
My question for you, Congressman, is how do you predict the relationship between the United States and Europe will change as a result of the financial crisis?
Oh, that's a great question, and I think it's kind of a question mark. We're not sure exactly what's going to be happening. Obviously, the president has just flown to France for the G20 summit, and the interconnectedness that we have with our economies is a reality. It might not be something that we want to acknowledge or that we even particularly like, but it is the reality of it. And I think it's really kind of an unknown, and we're somewhat limited here in the United States as to what we're going to be able to do to directly influence what is happening with the European recovery and what they're doing with Greece. But have no doubt, there is going to be ramifications for us economically, as well as I think possibly politically. So, but I'm not sure exactly how that's going to be playing out.
Let's go to William, Republican in Marion, Indiana. Welcome. Hi, William. Are you with us?
Hello?
Go right ahead.
Is this Representative Bill Higgins of the state of Michigan?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Hello. Yes, good evening.
Good morning.
I'm calling from Marion, Indiana, and I worked in Florida for about 2 years and was a marketer, made about $400,000, and was sent back to Indiana from Florida, and have been on SSI. That is directed to Representative McGovern. Why is the SSI not taxed on persons under 60? I've been on SSI for 40 years and haven't paid any federal income tax, and I've only lived in the state of Indiana. And my question to you is, why is the real worth of industry not put into buildings of construction? Why isn't there a state escrow between the contractor and the contractee of a real estate agreement?
I'm not quite sure I understood fully exactly what you were getting at there, William, with escrowing those accounts and those kinds of things. But for your question regarding SSI, that's something I'll take a look at, and I'm not familiar exactly with what the history of whether that's taxed or not taxed. Certainly, it's tax dollars coming into somebody who's collecting that. So are we going to go back and tax that again would be kind of an interesting question. So appreciate that.
Albertville, Alabama. Charlotte joins us on the Democrats line. Hi there.
Hi.
Good morning, Charlotte.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to ask the senator.
It's Congressman Huizenga. Go right ahead.
I would like to ask the senator how many block grants that he and his family have gotten since they started their business, and who authorized the super committee to do our congressman's jobs.
All right. As far as block grants, none. We've had absolutely no federal grants of any kind. The question about the genesis of the super committee, that super committee came out of the agreement that was connected with the debt ceiling increase. That was something that the Senate had wanted to put into the package. Kind of the House part was having a forced vote on the balanced budget amendment, something I think is very, very important. And the Senate had wanted to put in the super committee, or the joint select committee. So that was the genesis of it.
Our last guest was Representative McGovern of Massachusetts, who is concerned about cuts to food stamps and other nutrition aid programs that go to families and children. Do you think programs that help the poor should be on the cutting block?
Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we have a safety net that is there. But I also do believe that that safety net begins with me personally. I'm a person of faith and believe that my responsibility starts within my own church, within my own community, within my own greater family. And we ought to be the front lines, not just expecting the government to do that. Is there a role for government? Absolutely. But we need to make sure that that safety net is there for those who truly cannot help themselves, and doesn't become, some have quipped, doesn't become a hammock that others are just taking part in or taking advantage of a program. I thought it was a little unbelievable that there was an assertion made that there's really no fraud in the programs earlier, and I think that just simply isn't the case. I mean, we've seen study after study where we know that waste, fraud, and abuse is involved in all of those, but we've got to go through and prioritize. That should be a priority, but we need to make sure that we are using every single tax dollar to its highest and best use.
A top official from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau visited Congress yesterday. I'm looking at a story from The Hill. It says that the House Financial Services Subcommittee covered well-trodden ground at a hearing devoted to the CFPB's first 100 days. And as we look at the 100-day anniversary mark here, you said that the Bureau needs more transparency and accountability. How would you grade them in its first 100 days?
Incomplete, partially because there is no head of the CFPB yet, or I'm sorry, just newly appointed. But there is a lot of sort of building the airplane as it's rolling down the runway here. We under Dodd-Frank, this Congress, this previous Congress, I've been now part of this, getting inserted into it while it's being implemented. Has been kind of making it up as it's going. They've been trying to write the rules and trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. What's disturbing to me, Libby, is that if you sit in the committee, you'd think this is holy writ from on high, that they can't change a jot or tittle in this bill without a hue and cry coming up from the other side. And my time, I had been district director for my predecessor, Peter Hoekstra. I served in the state legislature, now being in here. Yet, in my involvement with government, have I ever seen a perfect bill that's come out and never needs to be changed? So we know that there are some reforms that need to happen in it. And one of those, Sean Duffy from Wisconsin, has a very common sense bill that would that would say, okay, instead of the CFPB, the head of this, being able to just implement rules, there's something called the FSOC, which is another group of people that it has to kind of filter through. We need to make this more of a democratic view of implementing these rules, so that there has to be an agreement on it, and not just one person coming in and saying, "Hey, this is how we're going to do it," and no questions asked.
Let's get back to our Skyped in questions. These are students from the University of Southern Mississippi. We've got Justin Mitchell joining us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning, John. In light of the G20 meeting happening in Cannes today, how do you feel about Greece's decision to reject the euro, and what role should the U.S. play in the European economic crisis?
It wasn't just a little bit,
we're breaking up there a little bit.
But he asked about Greece rejecting the euro. What would the implications of that be? And what is the U.S.'s role? We see President Obama there right now. He's in Cannes at the G20 summit.
Yeah, this is big. I mean, this is big for the G20. It's big for the European Union. Obviously, the EU and the Eurozone, slightly different. There's not everybody who's a member of the Eurozone takes part in the euro or uses the euro. It's kind of an unknown as to what really is going to be happening here. There's obviously a pretty robust reaction to Papandreou's call for a referendum within his own country. That seems to be rejected by his own party, the Socialist Party in Greece. He had somebody quit the government, and he only had a 3-seat majority. He had somebody quit the government, and 2 of them say that they absolutely would not support it. And now that, even though Greece is not a part of the G20, their economy isn't that big. Actually, it's not even quite as big as the Michigan economy overall. But they've asked him, Sarkozy and Angela Merkel have asked him to come to Cannes to talk about this. So we're going to see what's going to happen with what's going on. But it is amazing, Libya, that an economy that in relative terms is that small, smaller than the state of Michigan's overall economy, could have that much global impact. That's kind of the indicative of the integrated economies that we have on a world market.
Looking at a story coming in, this just from a few moments ago from Fox Business, the Greek Prime Minister may resign. George Papandreou, reports are saying that he could step down, and Fox is looking at how stock futures are rallying on that report. If he does resign, it could potentially scuttle the referendum that has put Europe's solution to its debt crisis in jeopardy.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Having served now for 10 months on the Financial Services Committee, I was somewhat familiar, but I've gotten much more familiar. I've been to Chicago a couple of times, which most people don't realize actually sees as, if not more, activity than New York does when it comes to derivatives and futures and those kinds of things. Pretty much anything related to agriculture runs through Chicago. But same thing in New York and then the international markets around, the DAX, the Hang Seng, others. They want stability. They want predictability. And I would argue in a way sometimes what may be a good move long term they would view as negative short term. And that's something that is challenging to this whole system. We've got to make sure that we're not just looking at the next day, the next week, the next month, the next quarter. We need to look at the next decade. And what is the atmosphere for job creation, for example, are we doing here in the United States? And sometimes that takes some very tough decisions. Same thing may be applied to Greece. I'm not sure that when you're running at over 16% unemployment as they are, nobody wants to lose their job, but clearly they have to trim the size of their government and the number of governmental employees that they have. Those are very difficult decisions, and at some point or another, the Greek people are going to have to make up their mind. Are they or are they not willing to accept sort of the parameters that the European Central Bank and the European Union are putting on them?
Let's hear from Tom in Los Angeles, Independent Line.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm also a realtor, Bill. Been one for 35 years.
Oh, good.
And in between that time, I've been a legislative bill reader for the Association of Realtors in California.
Okay.
So I follow things pretty well. Does anybody in Washington on the other side realize that we sort of have a national emergency is a time for austerity. There are people in the government, there are programs in the government that need to be cut back. That would be number one. Number two, on the people that are being foreclosed on, there is a negative amortization program that was very popular some time ago. Could the government not institute this, allow people to reduce their payments, say 50%, have that money added on to the end of their loan, go for a period of 5 to 7 years while the economy turns around, maybe they can get their jobs back. They keep their houses, and eventually the values will be back up. I'm pleased to see somebody there that is a realtor, because we've sort of gotten a bad end of the stick here. Chris Dodd and Barney Frank did nothing to but exacerbate the problems with the people who got loans that really didn't require them. So I'd like to hear your comments, and I thank you very much for your time, and it's good to see someone that understands a hardworking business.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate that call, Tom, and it's interesting. You've been in real estate. I got my license about 20 years ago, and it was interesting. Back in that time when we're doing housing development, you needed to own your lot. You used that lot as collateral to go get a construction loan, or you needed 20% down. That's a little different than when my parents bought their house. They had half the money, but what we saw happen is that 20%, which was kind of the norm, became 15, became 10, became 5, became 2%, became 0. Suddenly we saw 120%, 125% loan to value, and it was crazy. When you go to closing, and you'd be across from the closing agent, they say, "Well, here's your check. Thanks for buying the house. Here's your check, and because we know you're going to have to go get some furniture." And some of that is generational as well. I'm 42. I'll take some blame on this. My generation wants it now, and we're looking at it and saying, "Hey, of course I got to have the 3-stall garage and the master bathroom suite and all these other things." And we haven't had the same sort of view of what our parents have had. And I'm not saying that people ought to be buying a house and can only buy that house when they have half down. But pretty clearly we saw people that were outside their scope of paying. When I got into real estate, I was taught people aren't brown, they're not white, they're not yellow, they're green. And they're green because they can either afford it or they can't afford it. And I think that really needs to be the standard that we have. So I appreciate that. We're going to take a look at that reverse amortization idea as well.
This morning, C-SPAN's Campaign 2012 bus is at the University of Southern Mississippi, and we're joined by some of the students there this morning. We had some issues with Skype, so we'll go to the phones now and hear from Tondra Patterson. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Go right ahead.
Good morning, Congressman. Upon graduation, how will students be ensured jobs within the workforce?
Oh. Well, Tondra, I'm not sure what your major is, if you're one of our poli-sci majors or one of the journalism majors, but unfortunately there is no guarantee. I graduated with my political science degree, did not have a specific job, was working in my family gravel company, which had been my summer job, continued that afterwards, and it was an interesting day, the day that I decided I needed to go into real estate full-time. I had started to do developing, and I snapped a drivetrain on one of our trucks when I was backing up, and I had it. I'd sort of had it. Decided to go get my realtor's license and started that career. And I think oftentimes that's you're gonna find happens. There is no prescriptive box to check. Oh, I'm a journalism major or a political science major or a history major or whatever else, and you go out and here's my slot of jobs that I'm going to do. It's about going out and also being entrepreneurial. What do you want to do? What's your passion? Ultimately, though, we've got to make sure that you've got some options and choices. And that, unfortunately, hasn't been the case. And I can tell you, there's been a lot of criticism about the Republicans not having a plan. Well, here's something I carry around in my pocket, America's Job Creators Plan. The first one is empower small businesses, reduce government barriers to job creation. And please go to my website, and you'll be able to see this, or go to jobs.gop.gov, and you'll be able to see this as well. But it's about creating an atmosphere that's going to allow you to go have choices. And clearly we don't have that. We don't have enough of those jobs. And I think it's our job here in government, state, local, federal level, to create the atmosphere for the private sector to go out and create those opportunities.
Story this morning on NPR reported by education correspondent Larry Abramson. College students are borrowing at an all-time high. And here's how the story starts. Students are borrowing more money to pay for college than ever before. New data shows that students who graduated in 2010 carried 5% more debt than in the previous year. And education debt is expected to grow in the coming years as students struggle to pay higher tuition costs.
It is a problem. My wife and I have 5 young kids. We employ a lot of babysitters who are in high school, going into college, and coming out of college as well. So we hear those stories on a regular basis, and people have been focused on the debt that's been piling up. I think we also need to look at the other side of the equation. What's the cost of education? We've seen education just dramatically increase in its expenses, and that is something I think needs to be looked at. Now, I know in the state of Michigan, for example, a lot of that is dealt with within the state legislature. There's not a whole lot we can do, but we do need to make sure that we have some programs like those Pell Grants and others to try to help students.
Let's go to a Michigan caller. Hilda joins us on our independent line. Where are you calling from, Hilda?
From Coatmush, but I'm in Wexford County. I'm Coatmush Mailing and Music Phone.
Got it. I know right where you are. So
yeah, I know.
Music is home to the Truffle Festival, a mushroom festival up there.
Yes,
so
it is, and you're my guy down there. I've called your office before. Okay, listen, I'm so glad that I got through, and yes, I am at the edge of my seat.
I am too.
You know, okay. Just two questions, and I tried to call and I ran my phone bill up, how they keep saying about those tax cuts that went in 2001 and 2002, I think it was, and it was supposed to be for 10 years. And when they were supposed to expire, they sound like it's news to all these big business. It was a 10-year deal. Same thing they do with credit cards or whatever else. And you know, now I live up north, but I've got my best friend lives downstate, and you know about 202 or 203, it was noticeable how things were falling apart down there. I mean, businesses closing up and all that. Okay, that, I'd like to know why they make such it's like it's news or something, and it was a 10-year thing, and it didn't work. So I'm not the smartest thing, but that don't make sense to me. And the other thing is how they keep saying, well, the health care. That's why businesses can't hire people. You know what? I'm like a tape queen. I take C-SPAN. I did it so much, and I've got all these tapes in here, and it must have been from the late 80s or early 90s. They actually had congressional hearings because the insurance companies were just ripping people off. There was people that testified that had paid thousands of dollars, nothing qualified for their spin down or whatever. So that's nothing new either.
I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you up in the Cadillac area soon. At some point we'll be doing a town hall, and hopefully we'll be able to meet face-to-face as well. And if you do have questions, I hope you're not calling my office down in Holland long distance. You can call our Cadillac office as well, so that should be in the local phone book. But a couple of things. One, and let me tackle the health care one. First of all, that was kind of what you finished up on. It was 20 years ago this year. I was a college intern on Capitol Hill, and you're absolutely right. It was a hot topic and something that's been growing. And oftentimes people say, oh, well, health care just kind of came onto the scene. Well, that's not true. If you go back to the first the Clinton administration and the quote-unquote Hillary care debate that was going on, that was something that was a big issue at that time. And it's continued to be a big issue. Caller, it's clearly going back to what we have had, I would not view as success. However, for me, I don't believe that the health care reform that was put in place, the so-called Obamacare, is the right solution either. I think we need to make sure that we are creating a different system. And again, we've had some number of alternatives that have been passed in the House that are sort of sitting over in the Senate with little to no action on them. But we can't just go back to the status quo. That is not success. Your discussion about the tax cuts. You're right. It was a 10-year. It was intended to be a permanent tax level. That was the intent of both the president at the time and the Republican House. The Senate, however, didn't want to go along with that, and the only way to get those tax levels put through was to put that 10-year sunset on, then to have the debate again, which they did, and President Obama, along with the Democrat House and the Democrat Senate, extended it. So that's sort of the world that we're living in right now, and the debate's going on. What are we going to be doing? Because if we do nothing, those tax rates will be going back up. So that's going to be happening here in the next couple of months.
Story from the AP. Fewer people applied for unemployment benefits last week, a hopeful sign that the job market might be picking up. The Labor Department said today that weekly applications dropped 9,000 to a seasonally adjusted 397,000, the lowest level in 5 weeks. It's only the third time since April that applications have fallen below 400,000. The figures come a day before the government issues the October jobs report. Economists expect it will show a net gain of 100,000 jobs, with the unemployment rate remaining at 9.1%. Good news?
Only now do we see flat as good news. That unfortunately, Libby, is the new reality in a way. But as we discovered in Michigan, and if you dig a little deeper into these numbers, the numbers that we talk about in that you cite and that are cited in this article are not including those that either no longer qualify or, frankly, have just given up. And that's what we see in Michigan. You know, we have 11.1% unemployment in Michigan. We know it's significantly higher. Why? Because of the sort of elongated time period here that Michigan has been struggling, and it's been tied, as that caller from back in my district was talking about, her friend downstate. Well, in all likelihood, they were tied to manufacturing, not just automotive. We have three largest office furniture makers are in Michigan: Hayworth, Steelcase, Herman Miller. We've got a number of other manufacturers in aerospace and others, and Michigan's been going through an entrenched time period here of a depressed economy, and people just have frankly given up. And whether it's voluntarily or whether the time has expired, they're no longer on those rolls. So we've got a lot of work to do in helping to create a better atmosphere for job creation.
Let's hear from another student at the University of Southern Mississippi. Rachel Beach joins us.
Good morning, Congressman.
Hey, good morning, Rachel.
Do you agree with Bernanke's assessment that our fragile economy is in a state of recovery?
You're talking about Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke? Is that what I heard?
Yes,
okay, all right. Okay. Very fragile. I think it is, there's signs of life. But it's interesting, when you come to Washington, you get to know a number of people. And I've gotten friends from around the country. And as I was just talking about Michigan and what we've been going through, I think Michigan's sort of uniquely situated for this recovery. We have trimmed back expenses. If you have survived over the last 10 years in Michigan, you're employing some pretty sound business practices, and we've seen an uptick, pretty significant uptick in manufacturing back in Michigan. That is all good. When I talk to some of my other friends from the Carolinas or Georgia or Texas or down south or out west, they're sort of now only 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years into what Michigan's been going through for 8 or 9 or 10 years. And I think that it's more of a sense of fragility there than what we have in Michigan. And again, I think it's just because we had brought it down to such a base that we're uniquely situated for that recovery. But it is very tenuous and, frankly, could go off the rails, and we'll see exactly what's going to be happening in Europe, because that may influence us. The complicated, but a rather small company like MF Global has dramatic ripple effects. And in fact, I got calls from constituents in the agricultural community that had derivatives and other things that were flowing through MF Global and having things cleared through there that came to an absolute stop because of what was going on. So that just underscores sort of the interconnectedness that we have.
A story from the website mlive.com. Everything Michigan looks at donations made to you and one of your fellow congressional members from Michigan by the family members of the Anway Corporation. You've received some pretty sizable donations in the $25,000 range. Does that have an influence on policies? Does that gain your ear?
Well, actually, my relationship with the family goes way back, back to when I was in high school. One of the family members and I went to high school together. So it's a small community over there. But clearly, they're global leaders in manufacturing from all over. And they are essentially an Asian company based in Ada, Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids. So they lend a perspective. But being a realtor lends me a perspective. Being involved in the construction industry lends me a perspective. Having agriculture be a huge part of the district lends a perspective as well. So, you know, I am not one who takes orders or direction. I take input and then I make decisions, which is, I think, is exactly what the people of the 2nd District elected me to go do.
Samantha Rayborn joins us, student at the University of Southern Mississippi. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Samantha. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good.
Okay, of course, my question to you, Congressman, do you think the U.S. will drive G20 discussions on the euro crisis given its current economic state?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. Are we going to drive the G20 discussions? Is that what you said?
Yes.
I think it's somewhat limited. I mean, obviously, we are a significant part of that conversation, but we're not the only significant player in that organization. And I think so much focus has been on Europe right now. In many ways, you've seen that policy being driven by Angela Merkel in Germany and Nicolas Sarkozy in France. And you got to remember, back when we were doing our first stimulus package, it was actually Germany and France that scolded the United States, saying, "Hey, you know, you can't just keep piling on debt." And if you look at bond rates, for example, this was from yesterday's Wall Street Journal. Eurozone divided, talking about all the different bond rates. Germany's at 1.779% on a 10-year bond, which is actually less than what the U.S. Bond rate is, and I think it's a recognition of their sort of sound policies that they have had there. Same thing in the Netherlands. They're very low. They're number 2 at 2.2%. But that's why they're afraid of what's going to be happening in Greece and the interconnectedness there. But I think, in a way, sort of gone is that portion of us showing up and telling all the other countries what's going to be happening. I mean, that clearly is not going to be the case.
Jenna is Democratic caller in Atlanta. Hi there.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Okay, Senator, I got a question. With your family history working with the gravel, you as a realtor, you working in agriculture, why isn't more being done to control farm subsidies? Being in Atlanta, we're surrounded. We're on the red belt. Some of the biggest states that's raking in the most money in farm subsidies are the Republican states in the South. In Florida, they had a great article. It's about South Florida alone. Over $9.5 million went to over 230 dead people. The farm subsidy money needs to be regulated. And if that money is regulated and earmarked for the agricultural needs of this country, don't you think this would help?
Yeah, waste, fraud, and abuse, whether it's in the Department of Agriculture, whether it's in the Department of Defense, whether it's in HUD, doesn't matter. We need to make sure that we are using your tax dollars in a fashion that we can be proud of and you can be proud of. And unfortunately, I can't look into this camera or look Libby in the eye today and say, hey, we are using your dollars to their highest and most efficient use. It just simply isn't the case. So getting specifically to the farm subsidies question that you're bringing up, with the new farm bill that's coming up, it's my understanding that there will be a dramatic reshifting of how those programs are going to work. I think that should be the way it is. When I talk to my agricultural producers, and in my district it tends to not to be the corn and wheat and the major cash crops. There's some of that, but it tends to be dairy, blueberries, cherries, apples, I've got a Heinz pickle factory. Gerber baby food is in my district. So it's very connected in with agriculture, but not just those big sort of cash crop type things. Those producers are asking for the system to revamp as well, and I think we're going to give it to them.
Let's hear from one more student at the University of Southern Mississippi. Michael Sims joins us. Thank you.
Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Representative. My question is this. Are there any short or long-term effects of a Greek default that should be cause for concern among the general population?
Yeah, certainly. There are, and especially on that short term. The problem is that we might not know exactly what they are until it happens. That's really kind of the scary part. I think that ripple effect will hit our shores. It'll hit Europe more significantly than it will with ours, though. Yeah, there are going to be some of those ripple effects. Now, the question is, long term, what is better for us? You know, is it better to go through some short-term pain and deal with this to then shore up our financial situation in the long run? That's sort of the unknown, but it is scary, Michael. Anytime that you're going into something that you don't know what the outcome is going to be, that causes everybody to pause.
Latest news from the AP out of Athens. Greece's conservative opposition leader is demanding the formation of a transition government and the immediate ratification by Parliament of the new Eurozone debt agreement. Prime Minister George Papandreou came under growing pressure to resign after calling for a referendum on the deal, and he's holding an emergency meeting with his ministers.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch, and not just from an academic side, but from the business side. And it's hard to believe that a country that has a gross economy smaller than the state of Michigan, may have that kind of effect on the world economy, but it's a reality.
Congressman Bill Huizenga making his first visit to Washington Journal. Thank you for coming here. Republican who represents Michigan's 2nd District as a freshman.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We'd also like to thank the students from the University of Southern Mississippi who joined us from Hattiesburg with the C-SPAN campaign.